Week 4 in the books. Week 5 is upon us. He helps us break it down each and every single week. That being Jake Crain of Crain Company. Jake, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you taking the time as always.
Yeah, man, love coming on. It's been a crazy 4 weeks already, and we haven't even gotten to the meat of conference play yet. So there's a lot we know, and it's still a lot we don't know. I'm just glad to be talking, about actual on the field stuff instead of this NIL and conference realignment stuff that a lot of other people are talking about. It just, man, that grinds my gears. I get that it's a big deal, but I just wish we could focus on what's going on the field, even though the UNLV thing actually does have a lot to do with who's going to be on the field. It's just wild times in college football, man.
Well, Jake, I'm going to spare you the NIL and conference realignment stuff because I do want to talk football with you because there's a lot to get into. I want to start, Jake, with the game that took place over this past weekend in Norman, and I want to give you a lot of credit because while I was watching that game, I couldn't help but think, man, this is going pretty much exactly like my guy Jake said it would in the middle of the week. Thoughts on the game, 25-15. I'm not sure it was that close, and I certainly didn't have Jackson Arnold getting benched on my bingo card. But again, I do want to give you a lot of credit, Jake, because it felt like I was thinking back to our conversation that, everything we talked about, it just kind of played out that way.
Yeah, and first off, so happy that Oklahoma's in this conference. You guys fit right in. You're as nuts as all of us. Come on into the asylum. We'll eat the Jello and hear voices together. But that game went about, if you've watched, right, and you kind of understand what you're looking at, that game went how, a decent amount of people thought. But I my main thing was I wanted people to understand you can dominate a game and not win by 40. There's other ways to dominate opponents. And I think Tennessee, if you're a Tennessee fan right now, what should give you the most calm and the most peace are two things. One is that now you have the ability to win a track meet, a rock fight, and somewhere in the middle. Josh Heupel hasn't had that capability, right? It's the depth on defense and the talented depth on defense. Just because you have people doesn't mean you have great people. I think they're very talented, and they're so deep that even Heupel said it to Nico after the game. Look, I felt the flow of the game. I decided to not take a lot of chances offensively because now at Tennessee, we have the capability to shut people down defensively and win these type of games. And if you're going to win championships, the teams that win the most ways. And I think if you're a Tennessee fan, that should make you feel good on one hand. On the other hand, I don't think this is a flash in the pan thing at Tennessee. I think we can really start saying, hey, this Tennessee team is going to be a problem for a long time when you look at the way the momentum is rolling and what we're seeing on the field and who Nico's going to be by the end of the season after having gone through this. Now, Oklahoma wasn't great offensively by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of that was what Tennessee took away. Tennessee forced them out of being able to just line up and run the ball and stay on schedule and said, all right, if you want to run RPOs, that's great. We're going to take away both your ability to run, and Jackson's going to have to beat us with his arm. And he wasn't able to do that. And the field position battle was on Tennessee's side the whole night. That's something I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. Outside of when Nico fumbled that ball and then Tennessee got it right back the next play, Oklahoma was starting from the 15 and in, it felt like the whole first half. And when you're playing against a defense where you're struggling to be balanced and multidimensional, being pinned back does nothing but worry the offensive coordinator even more and shrink you even more. So this Tennessee team, you got to give them their flowers. And then on the Oklahoma side, it's what a lot of us thought going into the year. And a lot of Oklahoma fans, called some of us crazy for saying when you have a brand new young quarterback and you had to replace your whole offensive line, even though some of these offensive linemen have played before and you got a legendary offensive line coach, you've got to build that chemistry throughout the year. And we've seen that kind of rear its ugly head. I know there's been injuries on their offensive line. But I want to make sure as much as people are piling on Oklahoma's offense, and deservedly so, and as much as we knew they were going to be good on defense, which Oklahoma is, this Tennessee team, Josh Heupel, took a Tennessee team back to a place where he won a national championship as a quarterback, got fired as an offensive coordinator, and beat him with defense. If that's not pulling a Harvey Dent, then I don't know what is in this sport.
Jake, really quickly, when you look at this Tennessee team, do you think it's time we start talking about them as a potential national championship contender? Do you think, I mean, I know it's maybe a little bit of an overreaction early on in the season, but do you think that is within possibility for this group?
Yeah, it's within possibility because this defense is here to stay. That you can say what you want about the schedule. That's fine. But when you watch guys run around, if you know what you're looking at, and you watch guys disengage the way they disengage up front, and you watch how disciplined they are, it's one thing to be talented. It's one thing to be fast. It's a whole other thing to be talented, fast, and disciplined. We got to start talking about this defense as one of the best in the SEC in the country. Like, we really have to start doing that. And this offense is just going to continue to grow. Nico's just going to continue to grow as he goes on. By the time we get to where the playoff would be, Nico's going to be an even more completely different player than what he is right now. It's like being a pitcher in Major League Baseball. Sometimes you go out there and you got your best stuff and you're striking guys out and you go 7 innings, you strike out 9 guys, you give up 1 run, maybe whatever, you have a great outing. But there's some outings where you don't have your best stuff. Maybe your slider's not working and you're not striking everybody out and you got to pitch to contact, but you still go 6 2/3, give up 3 runs and put your team in a position to win the game. That's what this position entails. And I think that growth while winning is going to do nothing but pay dividends for Tennessee down the stretch. And we're going to know a lot more once we see him against Bama and against Georgia. But I don't know how 5 weeks in now, you don't look at this Tennessee team and be like, we have to put them in that tier 1 in the SEC. They were like borderline tier. They were the top of tier 2, right? We were like, what's LSU going to be? What's Tennessee going to be? What's Texas A&M possibly going to be? They are now up in that tier 1 with the Georgias, Alabamas, and the Texases, and I think Missouri too. I don't know if we're going to get to that or not, but I've got an opinion on that I think people are being unbelievably hypocritical when it comes to the way they treat Missouri and the way they treat some of these other teams.
Jake, let's just go straight there. Talk Mizzou. Again, they beat Vanderbilt in 2 overtimes, 30-27. Jake, I loved Vandy plus 21. I did not expect it to be that close, but obviously you feel pretty strongly people kind of overreacting to, because there's a lot of opinions out there that maybe Missouri is, not quite as good. They struggle with Boston College. They struggle with Vanderbilt. These aren't necessarily high-profile opponents, but you're saying give Missouri more credit than they're getting currently.
Well, I'm just going to keep the same energy with everybody. I'm not saying that every team is the same. I mean, circumstances, dictate outcomes and opinions when the way that I look at it. But what I keep telling people is, how on one hand are you going to look at the way that Georgia played against Kentucky? I don't care how it's gone in the past at Kentucky. Every year is different. That's why that trend stuff to me it's I guess you can look at it, but I don't put too much stock in it, because if you've ever coached before, every team is different. Every year is different. Typically, coaching staffs are different. I don't know how you sit there and watch that Georgia-Kentucky game and go, man, Georgia, what a team. What a way to survive the game against Kentucky. And then look at Missouri and go, God, they suck. They only beat Vanderbilt by 3. Let me tell you something. Vanderbilt's better than Kentucky. They're better than they are. Now, I know Missouri played them at home and Georgia went on the road, but why can't we say the same thing about this Missouri team surviving a game they had to survive? And typically good teams have to survive a couple throughout the year. Why are people saying, man, Georgia, what a team to survive that, but Missouri, no, they're trash? I think Vandy beats Kentucky by double digits on a neutral site. I mean, why wouldn't you think that? I don't understand, just and I know Georgia has built up a lot more equity than what Missouri has, even though what Missouri did last year, I get that. And I think Georgia's better than Missouri. I'm not saying they're not, but I think Vandy's better than Kentucky. And sometimes, and I try and tell people this, going on the road is easier. It's easier. Why do you think sometimes these teams play so much better on the people are like, man, Alabama sure did play clean and looked a lot more organized from a penalty and turnover standpoint at Wisconsin than they did at home against Western Kentucky and USF. Well, it narrows your focus. You're taking 18 to 22-year-olds into hostile territory where most of them are not familiar with their surroundings, and they realize, oh, my God, we have to play clean because we're not going to get any breaks here. They're going to hate us, this, that, and the other. Sometimes it helps. So I don't buy into the, oh, well, Vandy or Missouri was at home, they should have beat them by 30 or whatever. Now, again, do I think there's a lot of questions still about Missouri? Yes. But two things can be true at once. They're undefeated. This group has won a lot of games together, and I know who can make the explosive plays for them. I don't know who's going to make the explosive plays for the game I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, Jake, let's move there because I had to watch it in person, so I'm going to make you talk about it. Arkansas beats Auburn 24-14. The ineptitude of the Tigers on the offensive side. Let's give credit, obviously, to the Hogs, but
yeah,
bro, what's going on in Auburn? And then you got Hugh Freeze coming out earlier, after the game earlier in the week saying that, the real shame in it, Jake, is if we played them 9 more times, we beat them 9 times. And, well, maybe you should have beat them the one time you played them, Hugh. I mean, dude, well, again, you talk a little Arkansas, but what is going on in the Plains, man? How we feeling?
Well, the only thing I know 9 out of 10 times is 9 out of the last 10 times I've watched Auburn play in a big game, I've puked outside in disgust. That's the only 9 out of 10 that I know. And it's funny, Chris, if you go back to last week when we talked about this game, sat here and said that nobody's going to win this game, somebody's going to lose it. Mm-hmm. And offensively, that was a battle of who can lose it the most. That's what that was. And Auburn, Arkansas is always a crazy game. And you do got to give Arkansas credit for winning. But offensively, that was a cripple fight. That's if I've ever seen one. It was an absolute 100% scream it on the intercom. Let everybody in the city know we got a cripple fight. I just and Auburn specifically, there are some positives. Like Auburn has moved the ball pretty decent. But Auburn doesn't make, middle of the road mistakes. This team doesn't. They make catastrophic mistakes, offensively and defensively. Starting on the offensive side, what is the worst thing, Chris, that you can do on offense? What is the worst thing that you can do?
Turn it over.
Turn it over. Auburn doesn't just overthrow guys, oh, no, we got to punt. Or, hey, we false started, got backed up, 2nd and 15, we weren't able to get it. No, they give the ball to the other team. They give them the ball, which means you get no points, and you probably give them good field position and a chance to score points. That is, you can't do it. Auburn is like the NASCAR driver that leads for most of the race, and on the last lap, he just crashes every time. Every time, just crashes. Defensively, overall, Auburn played pretty well on defense, played physical, did some good things. But when it came down to the most important moments, they blew it. How do you rush 3 and drop 8 and get beat deep? How does that happen? Especially after what happened against Alabama last year on 4th and goal from the 31. You could put a gun to my head and we wouldn't rush 3. There's just no way. Then you rough the passer on 3rd and 14. Auburn is the worst team, one of the worst teams in the country at turning the ball over and stopping people on 3rd and long. That is winning fentanyl. Mm. It kills it. It's the worst thing possible. So I don't know right now how I can sit here and say, it's obvious how they're going to, how they could fix it, but you can't be under-personneled, which Auburn doesn't have the roster they need yet. It's going to take time to build that, but you can't be under-personneled and undisciplined. You can't be slow and stupid. You got to pick one. Either you're not, your team isn't as talented as the other, but man, you're coached up. You're coached up so well that it closes that talent gap a little bit. Or you're either so talented that when you are undisciplined, you're talented enough to make up for it. Auburn is neither of those. They're both put together, which is the worst. It's like, what's that movie where it's like, fat and stupid's a terrible way to go through life? Is that Animal House? I think so. Pick one. Either be less talented and really disciplined, or unbelievably talented and undisciplined. I would take one of the two. You can't have both, right?
So, Jake, it's interesting leaving the stadium on Saturday, which it didn't take away from the experience, I'll tell you, but leaving the stadium, I felt like it's not time to sharpen the pitchforks and fire Hugh Freeze, but I think what you do have to come to grips with is that just Auburn is off schedule. Is that fair? They're just off schedule. This thing isn't exactly where folks thought it would be in year 2. Again, not time to fire Hugh, but it's very off schedule.
Well, and first of all, I don't. Anybody thinks you should hire Hugh Freeze, y'all got to calm down. or fire him. Like, y'all got to calm down. Like that's crazy. I still think Hugh Freeze is going to get this thing right in the long run. It's just, sometimes in a relationship, it's not going good, right? It's like me. I forget to close the cabinets all the time. My wife gets pissed, but guess what I do, Chris? I close the damn cabinets now. I learned from it. I moved on from it. I've gotten better.
You say nine out of 9 times I would have closed
9 out of 10 times. There are times where I get up in the middle of the night and go down to the kitchen after I get done defending the city, and I'll leave a couple open. But it feels, again, it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, Auburn fans knew, they're like, all right, the personnel should be better this year, right? Even though you didn't go get a quarterback from the transfer portal, when we begged you to, and you didn't do it. You didn't do it. You knew the personnel, though, around them would be better. But I think where people are like hung up on is the talent looks a little bit better in some spaces, but they looked poorly coached. They look unserious on offense. Like, again, it's if it was like, hey, look, you can see it. Like, we don't have all the players we need. We may not be as deep on the front seven as what we're going to be, but man, the guys are tuned up. They're locked in. They're smart. They understand that you have to thread this needle from a discipline standpoint on the field. And that doesn't mean you don't have penalties or even turnovers sometimes, but not at this rate. You can't keep choking in big moments at this rate, this much, without there actually being a problem. Like, is it a confidence problem with the players? Are they nervous to say, oh, please don't run it at me on this important down? Oh, no, I hope he doesn't call a pass play on this important down. That's what it kind of feels like. It feels like the other teams have guys that want the moment, and Auburn has guys that crumble in the moment. And at this point, if you're an Auburn fan, you go back and think, over the last 4 to 5 years, name one big moment where Auburn has come through in a big game. When's the last time that happened? Was it Bo Nix against Ole Miss? That's a long time ago, man. That feels like ages ago. Bo Nix against LSU. I'm not talking about against New Mexico. Like, Auburn continuously falls flat, whether it was Brian Harson's last year or through Hugh Freeze's tenure. And that's what should worry Auburn fans the most. Yeah, the turnovers, right? Yeah, the undisciplined stuff on defense. But I've seen undisciplined people that turn the ball over clutch up every now and then. Nobody on Auburn's team clutches up. And that should give you the most worry if you're an Auburn fan, I think.
Jake, before we move off this game really quickly, what would you do at quarterback?
Well, I think the easy answer is if everything's equal between Hank Brown and Peyton Thorne, you got to go with experience, and Peyton Thorne's a little bit of a better runner. I'm still waiting, and I've been saying this since before the season. I thought, Sam Jackson transferring over from Cal, who played quarterback for him, there'd be some package in there for him, kind of a little bit like they had for Ashford. And we haven't seen it yet, just to give the defense something different, because at this point, if you're Hugh Freeze, you're having to call plays to just not screw it up. And when you're doing that, it just limits you so much on what you can call. You're not setting the tone to the defense. The defense is setting the tone to you. He talked about not calling as many shot plays. Man, that sucks. Like, you're having to sit here and say, man, like, it's almost like realizing you're ugly and like, hey, man, maybe I need to stop talking to pretty girls. Maybe I should just start talking to like ugly girls, because like that's what I'm gonna have the best chance with, and not look like a fool. And I mean, on that note, you look at this Oklahoma game. I mean, if I'm an Oklahoma fan right now, Auburn is the slump buster of the SEC, because it's not, no offense to Vanderbilt, I was talking about earlier, but Auburn is still a brand name. Like, people know Auburn, and you go win at Auburn or beat Auburn, you feel good about that as a player. But Auburn's turned into the slump buster of the SEC. Like, hey, man, listen, the 8.5 may have turned you down, but there's a 5 that comes from a rich family that's got a great sense of humor and makes a mean spaghetti. She'll go home with you. That's who Auburn is right now. So, you got to find a way to dig yourself out of that hole, because, it's kind of like the girl that the 7s walk around with to make them look like an 8. We all know those girls, right? So it's, that's who Auburn is right now. And it just, and something else, Chris, that just bothers me. And I know we need to move on. If I hear Hugh Freeze one more time after a loss in a big game say, well, we're not defined by our performance, I'm going to lose my mind. And I'm not saying that whether you win or lose should define all of who you are, but it's still a big deal. And you should take pride in the way that your team looks, or in your run that theory in any other profession. I'm going to count it. I'm terrible at my job. I just cost our company again tons of money. But hey, I go to the CEO and say, well, at least I don't beat my wife. Or, I'm not embezzling money from the company. I'm just losing it. That doesn't work. You're paid millions of dollars to win games, man. When did being a good person and giving great effort, when was that just enough? And the wins really don't matter. That is a loser mentality. I don't care. That's great. I want there to be great people on the team. But you still have to take pride in the way that you make millions of dollars, and players are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like if you just want it to form good people, start a nonprofit, dog. Open up a halfway house. Like open up a daycare. This isn't, you're paid millions of dollars. People pay lots of money to go to Auburn and watch these games and stay in these hotels and buy this food. And you coming up there and saying, well, we may not win games and be an unserious product, but guess what? We all walked an old lady across the street this week in Auburn. So it's all worth it. What a great gig. That's amazing, because that doesn't work in any other aspect of life in the real world.
Jake, before we move to week 5, anything else from week 4 that stood out to you?
I mean, it's just craziness again. I think, it's when you look at the Southeastern Conference, Mississippi State's got a long way to go roster-wise, but we knew that. Ole Miss is still fascinating to me, man. Fascinating to me. I think they're really good. I look at them on the front seven on defense. People say, the schedule. Well, I go back to the Tennessee thing, and Tennessee's played a harder schedule than they are. You know what you're looking at when you see it running around. So I'm so fascinated for these next 4 to 5 weeks, because we basically got a round robin of the top teams. So it's going to be amazing. And Texas and Oklahoma are such good fits in the SEC. So excited that they're here and they fit right in.
Jake, let's get to week 5, and let's start with the game. You could argue the biggest game of the SEC season, at least one of the biggest. The Georgia Bulldogs go to Tuscaloosa to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. You will be there. I will be there. Our good friend Josh Pate will be there. College Game Day will be there. The who's who
Trump's
of college
gonna
football,
be there.
baby. Trump's going to be there. Yes, all the celebrities, including Jake Crain, are going to be out and about.
Yeah.
The Crain Company boys, might I add. Not just Jake, the entire crew, the 3 amigos. This game, though, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, at Bryant-Denny Stadium. If you ain't excited about this one, you ain't got a pulse, Jake. Just talk about this game, this matchup, what you're most looking forward to. Which way are you leaning in this ball game based off what we've seen and how it sets up on Saturday night?
The Lannisters versus the Targaryens. Here we go again, baby. This is a game of kings, Game of Thrones, one may could say. Look, we're super excited. We've never live streamed a game on the road before. We are going to be in Innisfree, in the bar, on stage, live streaming the game. So if you're not going in, come hang out with us. We're going to be breaking it down, taking questions, bringing people up, hopefully getting out of there alive, probably consuming some adult beverages as well. When I look at this game, the margin for error when you have 2 teams with this type of personnel, it's always very small. It's going to come down to 3 to 5 plays. It typically does. But I have more questions right now and concerns about Georgia than I do about Alabama. I like Alabama to win the game outright. I'll give you a score at the end. And here's why. Not that I think that Alabama is worlds better than Georgia. And I'm not one of these people that's worried about Georgia being able to stop the run. I know there's a lot of talk about, well, what Kentucky, the only thing they could do is run the ball, and they really weren't that great at it, yet they were still able to look competent and sometimes dominant running the ball, including at the quarterback position with Brock Vandegrift. But I don't worry about Georgia's defense like I don't worry about Lincoln Riley or Steve Sarkisian's offense. He's going to get that figured out, and they're going to have the best plan possible. What I worry about is Georgia offensively. And it's something, again, that we talked about after the Clemson game, even though Georgia beat him to death after the dam broke in the second half, is I don't care if you're Georgia. I don't care if you're Georgia Tech. I don't care if you're George Strait or George Stephanopoulos. You can't consistently go 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives and score touchdowns against the teams that you're going to have to beat to do the things that Georgia fans now expect to be able to do on a regular basis, and that's win national championships. You got to be able to find explosive plays in there, whether that's in the pass game or in the run game. And I think you're seeing just really how valuable Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, the combination, was over the past couple of years. Not that other guys didn't make big plays, and not that this Georgia team doesn't have guys that can make big plays. I think Dominic Lovett can make big plays. I'm interested to see if Oscar Delp can. You know, we know about Dylan Bell and his ability, and then ETN at running back, but we just haven't seen it. And going to Tuscaloosa against a Kane Womack coach defense, I don't think behooves you to finally hit those explosive plays. Now, who really knows what the hell's going to happen? But I think Alabama can hit some explosives down the field and with Jalen Milroe's legs more than Georgia can. And in a game that's going to be decided in 3 to 5 plays, like this game will be decided, I think that is going to be the difference. So Carson Beck can play really well, but I don't think they're going to be able to methodically move the ball down the field, Chris. And when you look at it, which defensive coordinator has the most to stop? Well, the answer is Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. Kane Womack is looking at this Georgia team and saying, all right, they can run the ball pretty well, but we feel all right stopping the run. And when we get them on third and passing, there's not 2 guys I have to bracket. There's really 1 guy, and that's Dominic Lovett. Then on the flip side, if you're Georgia, you're like, all right, Carson Beck really can't run on our side, but Jalen Milroe can run like hell on theirs. You're going to get a ton of Q counter. If you got Q counter and power read and all this stuff against Wisconsin, you're sure as hell about to get it against Georgia, because it's truly getting a hat on a hat, and it evens up the numbers. So you got to stop that. Then you got to stop the RPO game. You got to stop the zone read game. And then vertically, Alabama has shown they have multiple guys that can hurt you down the field. So just from a what do we have to stop standpoint, Georgia has way more to stop, at least at what we've seen so far, than Alabama has. And Alabama's at home, right? The coaching advantage, I do think, goes to Georgia, though, because Kirby has been in this game, and he's going on the road. And like I said earlier, sometimes that can even be better. And there's a ton of pressure on Kalen DeBoer in this game. Not to be too long-winded, I started the show on Monday. You know, Kalen DeBoer's done great at a couple open mics against Western Kentucky and USF. They absolutely nailed his performance at a huge frat party up in Wisconsin. But this is the first packed-out arena as an Alabama head coach he's going to play in. All the stuff he did at Washington, it may help him personally, but Alabama fans aren't going to feel better after this game about Washington beating Oregon twice last year if they lose it. He doesn't have that equity built up with the Alabama fan base. So you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And this has become the rivalry, the elite rivalry in the SEC over the past, really decade, I think you could say. So I like Alabama. I know they're a dog in this game, but when I look at what weighs more to each side, I've got to go with the Crimson Tide at home here.
First time as a home underdog since 2007, to just put it in perspective how great
Must
they've
be
been.
Nice.
Must be nice indeed. Jake, you mentioned the pressure on Kalen DeBoer. What about the pressure on Georgia football? Because I feel like when Nick Saban retired, our conversations immediately shifted to, okay, who does this benefit most? Out with Nick. Kirby, Georgia, it's your time to take over the top dogs, literally and figuratively, in the SEC. From that angle and the angle, Jake, of that schedule that Georgia's got in front of them, I'm not necessarily worried right now about Georgia missing the playoff or anything, but I mean, their road is more difficult than what Alabama's got to face. So talk about the pressure on Georgia, because I think this one, there's many different angles where there's a lot of pressure on the dogs to finally get it done against the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and Chris, you know this, and the audience knows this. When you coach in the SEC, really anywhere, but especially at these two places, the pressure is always at an all-time high. That's what makes it, such an attractive job to a lot of guys. Believe it or not, that's like a moth to a flame for some of these guys. And you want these moments. Like, this is why you work for this. This is why you do put in all these hours and miss the time away from your family for games like this, for moments like this. to seal your name into history forever. And if you're Kirby Smart, the knock was, well, you can't get past Nick Saban, and then you get past him one time, but you still don't have a great record against him. Now you feel like you're the older guy in this rivalry, and you want to set the tone of what it is going to be, right? Because let's not forget, Kirby Smart is the boy who lived. He's the golden pupil of Nick Saban, right? The one who made it out of all the Spartan children. Like, this was the Kirby was the one really that went out there and killed the werewolf and walked back wearing it. And he wants to let Kalen DeBoer know this is a rivalry that you're brand new to, and I need to let you understand early that we are going to dominate your ass, whether it is in Tuscaloosa, whether it's in Athens, whether it's on Jupiter or Pluto. You got to set the tone early, and you got to take away hope and confidence, not only from Kalen DeBoer, but from the Alabama fan base. Because think about if Georgia wins, right? Your first year in the rivalry, Kalen DeBoer has a lot of Nick Saban's old players, and you get Georgia at home. It'll never be more Nick Sabanist for Alabama in this rivalry than it is this year, because Kalen DeBoer is going to continue to bring in his guys, and that's how it should be, and Kalen DeBoer should do it his way. So if you're Kirby, you want, it's like that movie with Tom Hanks, and I can't remember, where the guy tells him, hey, I'm the captain now. And in this rivalry, it's Kirby Smart's turn to tell the Alabama coach, hey, I'm the old head in this one. I've been through these games. You may have played Oregon when you were at Washington. You may did this in the playoff, but this is the SEC, and this is the top level of it. And I'm sure Kalen DeBoer wants that. He obviously didn't take the Alabama job to duck the smoke, and more power to him. But yeah, it's massive for Georgia. And then if you take away just the narratives of the head coaches, the schedule that you brought up, I mean, yeah, 9-3 ain't getting in. I don't care if you are Georgia. I don't think 9-3 is getting in. Not saying that I think Georgia's going to go 9-3. But when you look at what would happen if they lose this game, well, now you've really got to thread the needle, including winning the conference championship game. Because if you get into the conference championship game in the SEC, it's going to be interesting if you've got a 10-3, if Georgia were to make it at 10-2 and then lose the SEC championship game, and now they're 10-3, and then you got Tennessee at 10-2. And I don't know, it's just going to make it wonky at the end. So, yeah, it's massive when you look at, circumstantially just the schedule the rest of the way for Georgia, as opposed to Alabama and a couple other of, the tier 1 SEC teams.
Jake, let's move to that game in Arlington, AT&T Stadium, A&M against Arkansas. I feel like this is the who knows what's going to happen bowl, because I have just no idea. I feel like every year this game, Jake, if you just told me on a year in, year out basis, and I think this is the last one, by the way, in Arlington, which both fan bases seem really happy about. But
yeah,
Jake,
it
feels
like
games
at home. What are we doing?
Well, play the home and homes. I agree. But it feels like this game every year spreads around 3.5, 4 points. Like it just nobody knows what's going to happen. But I say all that and say that Texas A&M is 11-1 in the last 12. So you look at this game; it's a huge opportunity, obviously, for Arkansas. I mean, same can be said for A&M and Mike Elko as they try to. Last week was interesting. Beat Bowling Green by 6 points. Right? There's some kind of uneasy feelings.
Look, Bowling Green's a problem.
They are.
Bowling Green. Look at what they did with Penn State.
Yes,
like Scott Leffler's throwing massive whammers and keeping games close out there.
Yeah. Jake, I mean, what's your feel in this one? Again, this one I feel like is one of the hardest games on the board to predict this week.
Well, I know what Texas A&M is going to do. I like the under in this game, to be honest with you, because, Taylor Green has showed he's still inconsistent as a passer. Like, I think we have enough sample size right now. He threw it about as well as he's going to throw it against Oklahoma State. And then you've kind of seen him go up and down with UAB and Auburn. Is this a game where he's able to put it together again through the air? But he got beat up running too. And he's got to change the way he runs. Like, you can't keep trying to jump over people. Like, I know you're big, but you ain't that big, man. Ask KJ Jefferson. I mean, he's a refrigerator on roller skates, and he still couldn't make it through.
Jake, he was also getting some of his receivers killed. Auburn.
So I think Mike Elko is going to say this. All right. You haven't showed us the ability, if you're Arkansas, to really throw the ball consistently. So I'm going to go in here. I think it's going to be a lot like what Josh Heupel did at Tennessee. He's like, all right, y'all can't move the ball on offense. I'm not taking a bunch of risks on our offense, especially with a young quarterback in Marcel Reed there. So I think you may get a low scoring, very conservatively play called game from a Texas A&M standpoint. And then if you're Bobby Petrino on the other side, how confident are you to not only call passing plays consistently, but call the RPO game, which could lead to a pass, right? If the look is there, and if I'm A&M, why would I not give you the look to throw the ball? If Taylor Green's going to beat me, I would heat him up with 5 consistently, but then bring my 6 or whatever and make sure I'm protected somewhat in the back end and make him throw to beat me. And I think A&M is way better than Auburn is in the front 7 on the defensive line overall. And I think Arkansas was that great up front on the offensive line. So I like A&M in this game in a low-scoring game, probably to get a couple turnovers. And then you're going to have to see the way Petrino calls it. And if Colin Klein is watching A&M's defense handle Arkansas, I think you're going to see very conservative play calling on that side and say, hey, let's win this game 24-13. I don't want to sit here and take unnecessary risks with a young quarterback who, look, I mean, he showed the ability to do some things throwing the ball. It's just, why would you put him in harm's way in a game you feel like you can control? But if you're A&M, if you let Taylor Green break contain and keep these drives alive on 3rd down, or you do stupid things like Auburn did and rough the passer on 3rd and long and he can find a way to make a play. So I like A&M and I like a low scoring game.
Jake, let's go to that game in Auburn as the Tigers take on the Oklahoma Sooners. Both these teams obviously looking to rebound.
Mm-hmm.
This is, Jake, I have wrestled with this game all week, to be honest with you, because I look at it and I'm like, okay, I saw Auburn in person. To your point, they're moving the ball, but they make catastrophic mistakes. They're facing an Oklahoma defense they got dudes on that defense. I mean, they've got some big-time dudes.
Stutz's my favorite player on defense to watch. I know a lot of people say, Travis Hunter. I get it, but watching that dude run around and make
cleans
plays.
it up. I mean, he cleans it up all the time.
The conductor.
So it's like I know that, and I'm like, I don't know how Auburn's going to move the ball, but I've just got this. I've got this weird gut feeling, Jake. I don't know if it's that bushwhacker I had a couple of days ago, or if it's something to me is screaming that Auburn's going to find a way to win this game. Am I crazy?
Well, would anybody, Chris, if you followed Auburn at all, over the past 2 decades, would anybody be shocked if they just showed up and it was like, oh my God, wow, this looks great. We're playing great. And then look awful 2 weeks from now? No, I wouldn't. But why would I believe that right now? Why would I believe that this Auburn team, even if they played well, wouldn't find a way to blow it? If you show me who you are enough, I'm going to believe you. Now, Oklahoma offensively has not been good. You're bringing in a young guy into a hostile environment, but I saw him come in and make some plays. He didn't blow it. I've watched Auburn blow it on offense, play well on defense, and then blow it, get beat deep when you're dropping 8. The one thing you can't do, you could do 9,000 things wrong and still it'd be okay, but you do the one thing that you can't do. I just don't know how you trust in this team yet. Now, that doesn't mean, look, Auburn fans are going to show up, and they should. Could Auburn show up and look great? It's Auburn. It's who the hell really knows. But just at this point, what I've seen over the past couple years, I just don't know how you think Auburn won't blow it, even if they're playing well. So I've got to lean Oklahoma, 20-17, something like that. But, this is why I don't bet Auburn games, because I've watched Auburn my whole life. And it's like going into one of those psychics. They'll be wrong about half the stuff, and then how are they right about the other half? You don't know. You just got to go sit down in there and let her flip the cards over, I guess.
And Jake, interestingly enough, this is a game where the spread has come down. The money has been coming in on Auburn. So
great.
It's come down a point, but still,
y'all have fun betting that. Good. Tell me how it goes.
I tell you,
I'll be betting who's ever playing Kent State and Ole Miss and Tennessee. That's who I'll be betting. Y'all let me know how it goes on the old Auburn bet.
Well, I will say, I think that's another game where the under could be a good play. It started at 47.5 down to 45.
What's that movie where he's like, is it Major League? Or is it Bull Durham? Where he's like, what's our record? And he's like, we're 7-22.
I think that's Major League. Yeah.
Man, he's like, God, how did we win 7?
Oh no, that is Bull Durham.
That's Bull Durham. Yeah.
It's
How
a
did
miracle.
we win 7?
Yeah. That's when they're at the shower scene. Yeah. Jake, simply, does Kentucky have any shot against Ole Miss to win this football game? I maybe they can cover, but anyway, Ole Miss is a wagon. I'm telling you, I'm riding that wagon
dude,
right
yeah,
now.
but you ain't got to tell me. I predicted them to play in the SEC championship
Bet them
game
till
this year.
they don't, right? Bet them to cover till they don't. That's
and listen, I got a lot of respect for Kentucky and what Mark Stoops has done, but I think the only chance they have is to know the guy that's either driving the bus or making Ole Miss's breakfast. I just don't. I mean, I think Ole Miss is, even though the schedule hasn't been great, look, and Lane's trying to win Jackson Dart the Heisman. That's why I keep taking the Ole Miss TTP. I took it at 49.5 last week. They're beating Georgia Southern to death. There's like 9.5 minutes to go in the fourth. And Lane's like, hey, let's throw the post. Let's throw the post. So that's what I'm telling you. It's the TTP. And look, Kentucky will probably go in there and have a great defensive plan. They always do under Stoops, but Ole Miss is just too much, offensively and defensively, I think.
Jake, final thoughts on week 5 before we get out of here. I didn't mention Texas, Mississippi State for good reason. There's just, again, Texas, another wagon. I'm going to keep riding. Didn't mention LSU, South Alabama. I mean, probably not.
Over in LSU, South Alabama.
Yeah.
Over,
Jake,
over,
I went to I don't know if I told you this. I went to the App State, South Alabama game in Boone. And South Alabama.
Hey, Boone's a pretty cool place.
Oh, yeah,
I
love
State
it.
Got pantsed.
Yeah, and I love it. They absolutely got drilled. But that South Alabama offense, that kid, I think it's
Gio. They call him Little Tua.
Yeah, he can move. He can scoot. He's got a cannon. So
I love the over in that game. LSU may score 60.
And South Alabama might score 35. So
yes, hopefully.
Yeah, to your point. Anything outside of the SEC or just in general excited for week 5? Any bets you're excited for? Let the people know. Yeah, man, I'm By the way, I took that Nebraska bet last week.
Bro.
I'm still not over that.
How, it's one thing, if Nebraska would have lost because, Luke Altmaier just, went nuts and threw for 400 yards and this, that, and the other, I could have been like, all right. But that's not what happened. Nebraska, got the run stopped. Their run stopped on offense, and Illinois couldn't stop anybody before that. That's how it goes in the game of football sometimes. But I like Boston College -13 at home against Western Kentucky. I like that number a lot. Again, who's ever playing Kent State, I would ride that. My brother's, dude, Blaine's almost made $30,000 in 4 weeks. Wow. He's like, dude, I'm worried about my taxes. He's like, I gotta I'm like, what a high class problem. Yeah. What a high, that's the richest thing I've ever heard you say. It's been insane, dude, watching this. But no, there's a bunch. We actually put out our best early bets yesterday on Crain Company. So go check that out too. Jake, appreciate you taking the time as always, my friend. Always a pleasure. Again, let the folks know one more time where you guys are going to be this weekend in Tuscaloosa so they can check it out. During the game. So if you're not going to the game, we're going to have the game on. Are y'all doing anything Friday too or no? Oh, yeah. We're doing a bunch of man on the street stuff. So, you'll see us walking around. Come hang out. We're going to be live streaming the game from Innisfree in T-Town. They're expecting 600 people there. So let's turn it up, man. It's going to be fun. Crain Company on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that stuff. We go live 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central each weekday. Come hang out with us. If you like this show, you'll like that one. Jake, appreciate you taking the time, man. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again next week, and I will see you this weekend. In the flesh, baby. Let's do it.